The bell at the outer gate of Stormhold should not have rung that night, because no living thing with sense in it was abroad in that storm, and yet it rang, once, weak and crooked, and I was the only one near enough in the cold scullery passage to hear it over the wind. I want you to understand what that wind was. I have served in 3 houses of the crown, and I have never heard anything like the blizzard that came down off the iron shoulders that night and sat on Stormhold like a hand pressing a man's face into the snow. It had been building since noon. By dark you could not see the chapel spire from the keep, and the chapel is 40 paces off. The drifts climbed the lower windows. The fires roared, and still the stone sweated cold. Every soul in that high, lonely castle had pulled in close, the way you do, and we had barred the great door and trusted the mountain to keep its own out, because the mountain always had. So when the gate bell rang, that small bronze bell on its frozen chain, the one the carters used in fair weather to ask admittance, I stood stock still in the dark passage with a candle guttering in my fist, and I did not believe it. Then it rang again, fainter, as if whatever pulled the chain had almost no strength left to pull it. My name is Aldous Wend, and I was at that time the understeward of Stormhold, which is a grand way of saying I kept the keys, counted the linen, and saw to it that the great folk above stairs never had to think about the 1,000 small cold things that keep a castle alive in winter. I am an old man now. I have told this story to my grandchildren and to men in alehouses and once, badly, to a chaplain. But I have never told it the way it happened, beat by beat, the way I still see it when I close my eyes, and so I will tell it to you now, because there is one man in it who deserves to be remembered, and he never once put his own name forward. I went to the gate. I want that known, because I have wondered since whether a braver man would have gone faster. I went, but I went afraid, and I went slow, and by the time I had wrestled back the iron viewing hatch in the postern, the cold that came through it took the breath clean out of me. There was a shape at the foot of the gate, down low against the stone where the drift had not yet buried it, a small shape, snow-covered, hunched, one-mittened hand still hooked weakly over the bell chain. I could not at first tell what it was. Then it moved, a slow, animal turning of the head toward the light of my candle, and I saw a face inside a man's old shepherd blanket, a small white face with snow frozen on the lashes, and I understood with a lurch that I have never forgotten that it was a child. A boy out there in that. "Help," he said, or he tried to. His lips had no shape left to make the word. What came out was a sound, a thin, broken thread of a sound, and then his hand slipped off the chain and he folded down into the snow and did not move. I shouted. God forgive me, I shouted instead of opening, because my hands were shaking too hard to find the bar and I needed someone, anyone, and the someone who came was the one man in all that castle I would have chosen if I had been calm enough to choose. He came out of the dark of the gate court at a dead run, and he was already pulling at the great bar before I had finished turning. Sergeant Cole Harrow, the guardsman of the night watch. I knew him the way you know the men who share your winters, by his stillness mostly, the immense unbothered stillness of him at his post, a man you could set your clock by and warm your hands at. I had passed him 100 times standing his hours at the inner door, red tunic, tall black bearskin, white gloves, the rifle at his shoulder, his eyes forward and his face giving away nothing, and I had thought, the way servants do, that he was a kind of furniture. A fine, disciplined, ornamental piece of the house. I had never once seen him move fast. I saw it then. He had the bar up and the gate hauled inward against the press of the drift in the time it took me to get out of his way, and the storm came in with it, a white roaring wall of it, and he went straight down on his knees in the open gateway with the snow flaying his face, and he gathered the boy up out of the drift the way you would gather something that might break. "Lantern," he said, not loud. He never once that whole night raised his voice. "Close the gate behind me, Mr. Wend, and bring the lantern and walk in front of me so I can see the steps. I have been given orders by stewards and by lords and once by a duke. I have never in my life obeyed anything the way I obeyed that quiet voice in the gateway. I got the gate barred. I got the lantern. I walked in front of him through the howling court with the light low so he could see his feet, and behind me I could hear him talking, low and steady and unbroken, into the bundle in his arms. There now, I have you. You're inside the wall, do you hear me? You're inside the wall, we're going to the fire, stay with me, lad, stay with me. The boy made no answer. That was the worst of it. The boy made no answer at all. We got him into the guard room off the gate court, the small one with the great hearth, because Cole would not waste a step climbing to the hall. He laid the boy down on the bench by the fire, and I saw him properly for the first time in the light, and my heart went over in my chest. He could not have been more than 9. His clothes were a shepherd's clothes, valley clothes, thin and worn and frozen into boards. There was ice in his hair. His skin had gone the wrong color, a gray-white with no blood under it, and his eyes, when they cracked open, were not looking at anything. "He's near gone," I said, which was a foolish thing to say, and I knew it the moment it left me. Cole did not look up. He had already stripped off his white gloves and was working at the boy's frozen coat with his bare hands, fast and certain, and there was nothing of the statue in him now, nothing of the still ornamental man at the inner door. "He is not gone," he said. "Not while I have him. Get the wet things off him, all of them. Then your own coat, Mr. Wend, the dry side against his skin. And send someone for blankets and for warm, not hot, warm water, and a fire built up in here higher than you have ever dared build one. Go." I went, and as I went I heard him still talking, low, that same unbroken steady murmur, to a child who could not answer, in the worst hour of the worst storm I had ever known, and I understood, running for the blankets, that the furniture had a heart in it after all, and that the heart was the strongest thing in that castle that night. The kitchens were a long cold corridor away, and I ran them like a young man. I woke Marta the cook with a hand on her shoulder, and she was up before I finished speaking, the way good kitchen women always are, and I woke the boy who tended the boilers and sent him for the water, warm, mind, not hot, the way the sergeant had said, and I gathered every dry blanket the linen press would give me, and I ran back through the cold with my arms full and my heart going like a hammer. It could not have taken me 10 minutes. It felt like an hour. When I came back into the guard room, with the door swinging, the heat of the built-up fire hit me in the face like a blessing, and I saw that Cole Harrow had not wasted one of those minutes. He had the boy stripped of the frozen things and wrapped in his own watch cloak, the great heavy gray one off his shoulders, and he had laid the boy not by the fire but a little back from it, and I did not understand that until later. He was sitting on the bench with the boy across his lap, and he had the boy's bare gray feet held between his own 2 bare hands, and his face when he looked up at me had a tightness in it I had never seen on him at his post. "Not by the fire," he said before I could ask. "Never bring a frozen man straight to the fire, Mr. Wend. The cold is in the deep of him. Warm the outside too fast and you drive the deep cold inward to the heart, and that is what stops it. Slow, warm the middle of him first." He nodded at the boy's chest. "Wool here against the body. The water in skins, wrapped in cloth, laid here and here under the arms, against the chest, between the legs where the great vessels run. Not on the hands and feet first, however much they want it. The hands and feet last." I stared at him. I had served great men all my life, and I had never once heard one of them speak with such exact and certain knowledge of a thing that mattered. "How do you know this?" I said. It came out of me before I could stop it. He did not look away from the boy. "Because I have buried men I did not know it for," he said, "and carried out a few I did. Bring the skins." I did not ask him anything more for a long while after that. We worked. That is the only word for it, and it is a strange word for what was happening, because what was happening was that a hard, disciplined soldier and a frightened old steward were trying with everything in them to coax warmth back into a small body that had given nearly all of its own away. And there is no work in the world harder on the spirit than that, because you cannot make it go faster than it goes, and the not going faster is agony. We laid the warm skins where he had said. We chafed nothing. He stopped my hand when I went to rub the boy's gray fingers. Sharp, the only sharp word he gave me all night. No, the flesh is frozen. Rub it and you tear it. Let the warmth come to it. Let it come slow. We built the fire and then we moved the boy and ourselves a careful distance from it and let the room be the warm thing, not the flame. And all the while Cole Harrow talked to that boy, low and even, the way I imagine a man talks to a spooked horse in the dark, except there was nothing of management in it. There was only kindness, plain and unbroken and entirely without an audience, for he did not know I was listening, or he did not care. "You're a long way up the mountain, lad," he said. "Long way from any flock. You came a hard road to find my gate. That was well done. That was a brave thing to keep coming. You can stop now. You don't have to come any further. You're inside the wall." And then after a long time, the boy's lips moved. I nearly missed it. It was so small. But Cole did not miss it. His whole body went still in a new way, a listening way, and he bent his ear close to the boy's mouth, and I saw his eyes change. "What is it, lad? Say it again slow." "Sheep," the boy said. It was the thinnest sound I have ever heard a human throat make. "The sheep, duh, have to tell my duh." Cole closed his eyes for 1/2 of 1 second. Then he opened them and he said in exactly the same even voice, "We will tell your duh. I promise you we will tell your duh. But not tonight. Tonight you stay warm and you stay with me. The sheep can keep 1 night. Your duh would tell you the same. He would tell you to stay by the fire. Wouldn't he?" The boy did not answer. But something in him eased. I saw it, the smallest loosening. And I understood that the sergeant had given him the one thing he needed more than the warmth, which was permission to stop carrying the thing he had carried up the mountain. "His father," I said quietly, leaning in. "There may be a man out there too, a shepherd looking for him." "There may be," Cole said. "And if there is, he is a grown man who knows the mountain, and the boy is here, and the boy is dying, and the boy is what we can save tonight. One thing at a time, Mr. Wend. We save the one we have our hands on." He looked at me then, and the look was not unkind, but it was iron. "At first light I will go out for the father myself if the storm has broken. You have my word on it. But the night is for the boy." I have thought about that since the discipline of it. Most men, faced with a hurt child and a vanished father, would have scattered themselves between the two and done neither well. He gathered everything he had onto the one life in his arms and refused to spend a single ounce of it on a thing he could not reach. It looked, in the moment, almost cold. It was the warmest thing imaginable. It was the difference between a man who wishes and a man who saves. The hours after that were the longest of my life. The storm did not break, it leaned harder if anything, so that the shutters bucked in their frames and the chimney sometimes drew the wrong way and breathed a gust of smoke down at us, and twice the lights of the keep above flickered as if the whole castle were a candle the mountain meant to pinch out. We kept the fire fed and held back from. We changed the warm skins as they cooled. And slowly, terribly slowly, the boy began to come back into himself. The coming back was not gentle. I had imagined in my foolishness that warmth would be a kindness to him, that he would sink into it gratefully. It was not like that. As the deep cold loosened its hold, the feeling came back into his hands and feet, and the feeling was pain, a deep grinding aching pain, and he began to shiver great violent shudders that ran the whole length of him and rattled his teeth in his head, and he began to moan, and then to cry. A weak, hopeless crying that was somehow worse than his silence had been. "That's good," Cole said, and I confess I rounded on him because how could it be good? "That's good, Mr. Wend, the shivering. The body shivers to make its own heat. A man too cold to shiver is a man dying. The shaking means he is fighting. The crying means he can feel, and a boy who can feel his hands is a boy who will keep them." He had gathered the boy up close against his own chest by then, inside the cloak, sharing the heat of his own body the way I have since learned is the oldest and best fire of all, and he rocked him a little slow, and he set his chin on the top of the boy's wet head. "I know it hurts, lad. I know. The hurt is the thaw. The hurt is you coming home. Hold on to me and let it hurt and it will pass. I have you. I have you." And the boy, who did not know him, who an hour before had not been able to speak, turned his face into that red wool tunic and gripped the front of it with one slowly thawing hand, and held on as if Cole Harrow were the last fixed thing in a spinning world. And Cole let him. The disciplined man at the inner door, the man I had thought of as furniture, sat in a smoky guard room in the dead heart of the night and let a strange shepherd's son cling to him and weep into his metals. And he did not move, and he did not hurry it, and he did not once look as though there was anywhere in the world he would rather be. I built up the fire. There was nothing else I could do, and a man needs to do something, so I did that, and I watched the two of them, and I will not pretend my own eyes stayed dry. Somewhere in the blackest middle of the night, the danger turned its face on us again. The boy, who had been shivering and crying, went quiet of a sudden, and his eyes rolled half up, and his head lolled, and a sound came out of him that was not crying and was not breathing right either. I came off my knees by the fire in a single lurch. "Sergeant." "I see it." He was already moving. He had the boy flat along the bench and his ear to the small chest and 2 fingers at the side of the small throat, and his face had gone to a thing of pure focused stillness, and the stillness this time frightened me more than any shouting could have. He's slipping. The cold still got a grip on the deep of him, and the heart's running slow and uneven. "Mr. Wend." His eyes came up to mine, and they were perfectly steady, and that steadiness was the only thing that kept me on my feet. "I need you to do exactly what I say when I say it and not a half second after. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, "yes." "Then warm that blanket at the fire, not scorching, warm, and give it to me the moment I ask. And do not be afraid. Fear's no use to him. I have brought men back from colder than this. Stay with me, and we will not lose him." I do not fully know all of what he did in the next while, for my hands were busy and my heart was in my mouth, but I know that he kept the boy breathing with a patience and a skill that no ornamental guardsman has any business possessing, that he warmed the air the boy breathed by breathing slow over him, that he pressed warmth to the small chest in the careful places and spoke to the boy the entire time in that low, unbroken voice, as though the voice itself were a rope he was using to haul a drowning soul up out of deep water. "Not tonight," I heard him say once, very quiet, almost to himself, and there was something underneath the calm of it then, some old private grief that the night had cracked open. "Not this one. Not tonight. You don't get this one." And the boy breathed, caught, shuddered, and breathed again stronger, and the awful gray began by inches to give way before a faint and blessed pink at his lips, and I sat down hard on the hearthstones because my legs had stopped holding me, and Sergeant Cole Harrow bowed his head over the child and stayed exactly as still as he stayed at his post, but it was not the same stillness. I knew the difference now. The stillness at the door was discipline. This was something a great deal older and a great deal harder to keep. This was a man holding the whole of himself perfectly steady, so that a frightened, half-frozen boy would have one calm thing to come back toward in the dark. He came back toward it. Near dawn, though there was no dawn to see, only a slow graying of the storm, the boy opened his eyes, and this time they found a face, and the face they found was Cole's. "You're warm," the boy whispered. It was almost an accusation, he was so surprised by it. "You're warm," Cole agreed gravely. "That was the whole of the work. Welcome back, lad, you gave us a turn." The boy's name was Tam. He told us in pieces, over the slow gray hours of that morning between sleeps, his small voice gathering strength each time he woke. He was a shepherd's son from a steading in the low valley, a good 2 hours' walk below the castle in fair weather, and he had gone out the day before with his father to bring the high flock down ahead of the storm, the way they always did when the sky went that particular hard color the valley folk knew to fear. They had got the flock most of the way down. And then a dozen of the ewes, frightened by the first of the wind, had broken back up the slope into the gathering white, and Tam, being 9, and being his father's son, and not wanting to lose a single one, had gone after them while his father drove the main flock on toward the fold. "He told me to stay with the flock," Tam said, and his lip trembled and the shame on his small face was a hard thing to watch. "He told me. And I didn't. I went after the ewes and the snow came down all at once like a curtain, and I couldn't see the steading and I couldn't see the flock and I couldn't see and I couldn't see anything." He swallowed. "I knew the castle was up, so I went up. Up's the only way I knew." Up was right, Cole said. He said it with such flat certainty that the boy's eyes came up to him. "Listen to me, Tam. You did 3 things right and any one of them might have saved you, and a grown shepherd of 30 years could not have done better. You kept moving. You went toward a light you knew was there even though you couldn't see it. And when you reached a gate you couldn't open, you found the bell and you pulled it and you kept pulling it after your hands had quit on you." He leaned down close. "Your father told you to stay with the flock because that was the right thing to do at that minute. When the minute changed, you changed with it. That is not disobedience, lad. That is sense. Your father is going to be frightened, and he may even be angry, because that is what fear sounds like coming out of a father. But underneath it he is going to be the proudest man on this mountain, because his boy got himself off the mountain alive. I have kept house for clever men, entitled men and men whose words were prized across the kingdom, and I have never heard any of them say a truer or a kinder thing than that ceremonial guardsman said to a shepherd's boy in a smoky guardroom while the storm wore itself out against the walls. The shame went out of Tam's face. It did not come back. It was somewhere in those long gray hours that I tried to make Cole rest. He had been awake the whole of the night, on his feet or on his knees the whole of it, and he had a watch to stand again at the turn of the day, and I am an old servant, and I know when a man is past the end of his strength, even when he will not show it. I told him to lie down on the second bench. I told him I would sit with the boy and wake him the instant anything changed. I even, God help me, made it an argument of duty, that a man who would not spare himself was no use to anyone tomorrow. He heard me out. He always heard a man out. It was one of the things in him. And then he shook his head once. "The danger isn't past," he said. "It looks past. The colors come back, the breathing's even. But a body that cold doesn't right itself in an hour. The heart can still falter. The chill can still turn to fever, and the fever can still turn the wrong way. The next watch on him is the one that matters, Mr. Wind, the quiet one, the one where everyone thinks the worst is over and lets their attention slip. That's the watch the cold waits for." He settled himself a little straighter on the bench beside the sleeping boy, and he laid 2 fingers lightly, where he could feel the small wrist without waking him. "I've stood a great many watches in my life over a great many things that didn't need me. I'll not be the man who walks off the one that does. I can sleep tomorrow. He can't if I'm wrong and I've gone to bed." I want to tell you that this was an extraordinary thing to say, and it was, but the more I have turned it over the years, the more I think it was the most ordinary thing in the world to him, and that the ordinariness of it was the whole point. He did not think of it as heroism. He thought of it as a watch. Something had been put in his keeping, and he would keep it until it could keep itself, and the keeping was not a feeling he had. It was a thing he did, hour after plain hour, whether anyone ever knew or not. I have met a great many men who could rise to a single brave moment. I have met very few who could simply not sit down. So he did not sit down in the way that mattered. He stayed. And once, perhaps an hour later, the boy did stir wrong in his sleep, a sudden fretful heat coming into his face and a thin sound of distress in his throat, and Cole was bent over him, and had a cool cloth to the small brow and a low word in his ear before I had even understood that something had changed. And it passed, because he was there to meet it. And I understood then exactly what he had meant by the quiet watch, and I was ashamed I had ever tried to send him to bed. The storm broke a little after full light. It did not so much stop as exhaust itself, the wind dropping all at once into a vast white silence, the kind of silence that comes after a great snow and feels almost like a sound in itself. I went up to the high window of the gate court and looked out, and the world was made over. Every hard edge of it rounded and softened and blinding. The valley below us, a clean white sheet falling away into a clearing sky, and not one living thing moving on the whole of it. Cole came up beside me. The boy was asleep at last, a true sleep, deep and easy, wrapped in 3 blankets by the safely banked fire, with Marta sitting beside him knitting and watching him breathe. The sergeant had his white gloves back on and his bearskin under his arm, and his face had gone back to its post face, the still ornamental mask I had read so wrongly for so long. But I could read it now. I could see how tired he was under it. "You said you would go for the father," I said. I did say it. He was already looking down the white valley, reading it, the way I had seen him read the gate court all night for the boy's next breath. "There's a thread of smoke down there, do you see it, by the bend of the river? A steading still has a fire in it. That's a man who has not slept and will not, who has been out in that all night calling a name into a wind that ate it." He settled the bearskin onto his head, and the transformation of him back into the figure at the door was complete and somehow heartbreaking. "I'll take the gate sled and 2 men and break a path down. The boy stays warm and stays put. When I bring the father up, the first thing that father sees is going to be his son alive by a fire, and not 1 second of doubt before it. See to that, Mr. Wind. That's your watch now." "My watch," I said, and I found I meant it like a vow. He went down the mountain. I will not stretch out the telling of it, because I was not there for it, and a man should not dress up what he did not see, but the 2 gatemen who went with him told it many times after, and they told it the same way each time, which is how you know a thing is true. They said the snow was waist deep in the drifts, and the sergeant broke trail the whole way and would not be spelled at it. They said when they came down to the steading the shepherd was not in it, that he was out, as Cole had known he would be, stumbling the white fields half out of his mind, horse past speaking from a night of calling, and that it was Cole who found him, who waded out to him through the snow, who took the broken, exhausted man by both shoulders and held him up and said the only 6 words that mattered. "Your boy is alive. He's safe." They said the shepherd's legs went out from under him, and Cole held him up out of the snow until they steadied. They said the man wept like a man does only once or twice in a whole life. And they said that all the way back up the mountain, on the sled, wrapped in the spare blankets, the shepherd kept reaching out to touch the sergeant's red sleeve, just to touch it, as if to make sure the man who had said those words was real. I kept my watch. I had the boy washed and fed on broth when he woke, and I had him sitting up by the fire in a borrowed dry shirt that hung on him like a tent, his color good now, his hands sore and red and whole, when the gate bell rang again. And this time it was a glad sound, 3 honest pulls, and I had the door open before the 3rd had finished. I have seen a great many reunions in my years of service. Lords come home from long embassies, sons back from wars, a mother once who had given a daughter up for dead. I have never seen one to touch what came through that gate. The shepherd, who was a broad, weathered man with the boy's own eyes, stopped dead in the doorway when he saw his son sitting up alive and pink by the fire, and he made a sound I will not try to write down, and then he crossed that room in 3 strides and went down on his knees and took the boy into his arms and could not, for a long while, do anything else at all. And the boy held on to his father and said over and over, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry about the ewes, I'm sorry." And the father said, "Hang the ewes. Hang every sheep on this mountain. Hang the lot of them, which from a shepherd is the deepest love there is." And Cole Harrow stood by the door, where he always stood, at his post, watching it happen and giving away nothing, except that I, who had learned in one night to read his stillness, saw the thing he was holding behind it, and I knew it for what it was, because I had begun by then to guess at it. The shepherd rose at last, with the boy still clinging to his side, and he turned to find the man who had done it. He looked at me first, and I shook my head and pointed, and he looked at the guardsman by the door, and he did not know how could he, what to do with a man so still and so plainly not wanting to be thanked. So he did the only thing a plain good man could do. He crossed the room and he put out his rough shepherd's hand, and his voice broke on the first word and he had to start again. "I don't," he said. "I don't have the words, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to give a man who—" He stopped. "You brought my boy back from the dead." "Your boy brought himself most of the way," Cole said. "I only opened the gate." "You did a deal more than open the gate." The shepherd's eyes had gone to Cole's hands, the white gloves, and then to the medals on the red breast, and I saw him reckon with it, the way I had reckoned with it in the night, that this was no kennelman, no rough mountain man used to lambing in the cold, but a guardsman of the crown, a ceremonial man, the kind of man you would never in your life expect to know the deep, brutal craft of bringing a frozen body home. "How does a king's guardsman come to know how to do what you did for my son? I'm a shepherd. I've thought a frozen lamb or two in my time in front of the fire and lost more than I saved. You did it the other way, the slow way. You knew. How does a man like you come to know a thing like that?" For a moment I did not think he would answer. The post-face held. And then, and this is the part I have never told straight, because it was his to tell and not mine, and he is gone now these many years, and so I think at last I may. Cole Harrow looked at the boy, at small Tam safe against his father's side, and something in him let a door open the width of a hand. "I had a brother," he said, "younger than me. We were soldiers together in the mountains, in a war you'll not have heard the half of, fought in cold like last night's cold and worse." He said it without drama, in the same level voice he had used all night, which is the only way the hardest things can be said. "We were caught out, a whole company of us in weather like this, with the way home cut, and I was young and I did not know then what I know now. I warmed the men too fast when we found shelter. I put them by the fire, the way you put a lamb by the fire, because I could not bear to watch them shake, and I thought the kindness was the warmth." He paused. "I lost 3 of them that night who might have lived. My brother was not one of the 3. My brother lived. But I have never forgotten the 3, and I went and I learned after from the mountain men who knew every last thing about the cold and the slow way back from it, so that I would never again stand over a man freezing in front of me and not know the right of it." He looked down at his own white-gloved hands. "I left the soldiering in the end. The fighting wore through me. I took a quiet post at a quiet gate on a high, quiet mountain where I thought nothing would ever again be asked of me but to stand still and keep good order. A very small thing happened at the corner of his mouth, the closest I ever saw him come to a smile. And then a boy rang my bell in a blizzard, and it turned out the mountain had been keeping me here for a reason all along." The shepherd did not say anything. He could not. He took the sergeant's hand in both of his and held it, and that was the thanks, and it was enough. That is nearly the end of it, but not quite, and the rest matters. They stayed 3 days, the shepherd and his boy, because the snow had closed the valley road, and a man does not send a child back down a buried mountain. And in those 3 days I watched something that I think of still as the truest measure of Cole Harrow. He did not fuss over the boy. He did not play the rescuer, did not crouch and collect the gratitude that any man would have been owed and most would have taken. He stood his watch as he always had, still and exact at the inner door, red tunic, white gloves, eyes forward. But every evening when his hours were done, he would come to the guardroom fire, and he would sit, and small Tam, who had taken to following him about the castle at a worshipful distance all day, would come and sit beside him, and the 2 of them would say almost nothing at all. The boy seemed to need only to be near the stillness, and the man let him. That was the whole of it. A boy who had nearly died sat in the warm beside the man who would not let him, and neither of them spoke. And it was one of the most companionable things I have ever had the privilege to watch. On the morning the road opened, and the steading folk came up with a sled for them. The boy would not go at first. He stood in the gate court with his father's hand in his, and he looked up at the sergeant, who had come to see them off and was standing at his post by the inner door, and the boy could not make his feet move. Cole came to him. He went down on one knee in the snow of the gate court, the same gate, the same snow, but a different morning altogether, so that his face was level with the boy's, and he took off one white glove and he put his bare hand for a moment on the side of the boy's head. "You go home now, Tam," he said. "You go home and you mind your father and you grow up tall, and one day you tell your own boy about the night you walked up a mountain in a storm and rang a bell with the last of your strength, because that was the bravest thing I have seen a man do, and you were 9 years old." He stood. He drew the glove back on. The post face came down, but gently. "And in the deep of winter, when the wind comes off the iron shoulders and you hear it at your shutters, you needn't be afraid of it. You beat it once. It knows your name now, and it knows you beat it. Off you go." The boy threw his arms around the sergeant's waist, once, hard, and then he turned and ran to the sled before he could cry, the way boys do, and his father lifted a hand to us, and they went down the white road into the valley in the clear cold morning, and they were gone. I stood in the gate court a while after the sled had dropped from sight. The sergeant had gone back inside to his post without a word. I looked at the great oak gate, and the frozen bell chain, and the place at the foot of the stone where a small shape had folded down into the drift 2 nights before with one mittened hand still on the bell, and I thought about how near the snow had come to keeping him. How a few minutes' slowness on my part, a few degrees of warmth applied the wrong way, a single ordinary man at that inner door instead of the one extraordinary one, and the snow would have kept the boy the snow nearly kept, and no one would ever have known the difference, because the mountain does not keep accounts. But the mountain had not kept him. A man had not let it. I have served in finer houses since, under grander masters, and I have polished better silver and folded richer linen, and stood at the doors of men whose names you would know. I have forgotten most of them. I have never forgotten Sergeant Cole Harrow, who I once thought was a fine ornamental piece of the house, standing still and giving nothing, and who turned out to be the warmest fire in the coldest place I have ever lived. A man trained all his life to hold perfectly still, who held still through 40 years of small days waiting for the one night the holding would be needed, and who, when the bell rang weak and crooked in the worst storm of my life, did not hesitate for the half of one heartbeat, but ran out into the killing cold and brought the boy in and warmed him, and stayed awake the whole long night so that a frightened child would never once, in the dark, reach out and find no one there. That, I have come to believe, is the whole of what the discipline is for. Not the standing still. The standing still is only the waiting. It is for the one cold night and the one weak bell and the one small life that the snow means to keep, and the man who is ready when it comes to say no.